The sea was not getting any calmer as we approached our destination, a small beach at the foot of sheer black cliffs. Captain Steve took us in about halfway, then slowed to a crawl and came scrambling down the ladder. "I don't know about this," he said nervously. "The swell seems to be picking up." Ackerman was staring at the beach, where huge breakers foamed. The first alarm came from Captain Steve, up above, when he suddenly shut down the engines and came back down the ladder. "Get ready," he said. "We're in for a long night." He stared nervously into the sea for a moment, then darted into the cabin and began hauling out life jackets. "Forget it," said Ackerman. "Nothing can save us now. We may as well eat the mescaline." He cursed Captain Steve again. "This is your fault, you stupid little bastard. We'll all be dead before morning." Captain Steve shrugged as he swallowed the pill. I ate mine and set about assembling the hibachi I'd bought that morning to cook our fresh fish dinner. Ackerman leaned back in his chair and opened a bottle of gin. We spent the rest of the night raving at each other and wandering distractedly around the boat like rats cast adrift in a shoebox, scrambling around the edges and trying to keep away from each other. The casual teamwork of the sundown hours became a feverish division of labor, with each of us jealously tending our own sector. I had the fire, Ackerman had the weather, and Captain Steve was in charge of the fishing operation. The hibachi was tilting dangerously back and forth in the cockpit behind the fighting chair, belching columns of flame and greasy smoke every time I hit it with another whack of kerosene. The importance of keeping the fire going had become paramount to everything else, despite the obvious and clearly suicidal danger. We had 300 gallons of diesel fuel in the tanks down below, and any queer pitch of sea could have spilled flaming charcoal all over the cockpit and turned the whole boat into a fireball, putting all three of us in the water, where we would be instantly picked up in the surf and dashed to death on the rocks. No matter, I thought. We must keep the fire going. It had become a symbol of life, and I was not about to let it die down. The others agreed. We had long since abandoned any idea of cooking anything for dinner, and in fact we had thrown most of the food overboard by that time, thinking to use it for bait. But we all understood that as long as the fire burned, we would survive. My appetite had died around sundown, and now I was covered with layers of cold mescaline sweat. Every once in a while a shudder would race up my spine, causing my whole body to tremble. In these moments, my conversation would suddenly collapse without warning, and my voice would quaver hysterically for a few seconds while I tried to calm down. "Jesus," I said to Captain Steve sometime around midnight. "It's lucky you got rid of that cocaine. The last thing we need right now is some kind of crank." He nodded wisely, still watching the flashlight in the water, then suddenly spun around in the chair and uttered a series of wild cries. His eyes were unnaturally bright, and his lips seemed to flap as he spoke. "Oh, yes," he blurted. "Oh, hell yes. That's the last thing we need." I backed away from him, not taking my eyes off his hands. Ackerman was nowhere in sight, but I could hear the staccato bleating of his voice from what seemed like 100 miles away. He was up on the bow, pacing around with a gaffing hook in his hands, watching for shifts in the wind, and screaming at the lights on the faraway cliff. "You brainless Jap bastards," he yelled. "Douse those goddamn lights." Captain Steve was now leaning over the back of the boat, sinking another hot dog down on the end of our line with the flashlight. "What the hell is wrong with those Japs?" he muttered. "Are they trying to signal us in?" "Yeah," I said. "It's an old Key West trick. Set up a false lighthouse and lure boats onto the rocks." Suddenly he leaped back and shouted, "Oh my God! A sea snake!" "What?" "A sea snake!" he said, pointing down at the water. "Lethal poison! Instant death! It came right up to my hand." I shrugged, firing another stream of kerosene into the hibachi and sending another balloon of yellow fire up into the night. I grabbed the bucket of water that I was keeping on the deck for emergencies. Captain Steve staggered sideways, shielding his face from the